for the way they lead and the way that they conduct themselves in the field that they operate. This session is workforce development and resiliency, and we entitled it Stepping Forward Stronger. These are indeed difficult times for workforce, and those who are hiring, those who are seeking employment are finding themselves again in complex times. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Jokho Farah. Trained as a general surgeon, Dr. Farah is responsible for developing, implementing, and evaluating strategic initiatives focused on eliminating health disparities and improving population health. Before joining People Center, Dr. Farah spent 3 years working with another safety net clinic. Prior to that, she spent time involved in international health, medical missions, and humanitarian work in Dubai and Tunisia. In addition to the American Health Association Board, she is the co-chair of the Minnesota Department of Health Equity Advisory and Leadership, HEAL Council. She also sits on several other committees, namely the Minnesota Department of Health Somali Public Health Advisories Committee, Cedar Riverside Neighborhood Leadership Committee, and New Leaders Council, Twin Cities. It is also my pleasure to introduce Dr. MayKao Hang, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and founding Dean of the Morrison Family College of Health. She talks about her path in life and how she found her purpose. Dr. Hang has found her purpose through her career, where she works to give back to those in need. She describes growing up as a Hmong refugee child in the Twin Cities and how those childhood hardships allow her to be grateful for her life as an adult. Today, she inspires those around her by practicing empathy and being an active listener for those who are experiencing hardships in life. Thank you for your participation in the 2022 Minnesota Public Health Association. We have asked you to comment on workforce and resiliency, and I have 4 questions that we prepared, and I'd like to start with the first one. And we all know that the public health field has faced challenges this past couple of years, unprecedented in other times. Either one of you may choose who would like to start. And here is the first question. How can the public health professional face these challenges more effectively and maintain their resiliency and resolve to forge ahead in the commitment, community health and wellness?
Such a great question. Are you guys hearing me now?
Yes.
Okay. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. A very good question. You know, I think there's a couple of things that we first have to acknowledge, right? Resiliency looks different depending on the person, the day, the challenges we're facing, right? And as diverse people, you know, we're operating off of different definitions of what it means to be resilient, right? And so first, I think we have to be mindful and sensitive and careful in the way that, you know, like we're defining what resilience is and means. It's not a trait, right? It's that one has or doesn't have, right? It's a little bit more complex than that and a little bit more nuanced, right? It doesn't occur in isolation, rather it's multifaceted. It's a multifaceted process that takes into consideration, you know, our cultural and contextual factors, right? Where we live, the circumstances in which that we live, we work, right? Sort of like the social determinants of health, right? And so when thinking about resilience and resiliency, right? What is that calling into, right? Who are the ones that are to be, who are the ones that are being resilient, right? Who are, what are the sacrifices they have to make in order to achieve those said triumphs, accomplishments, perseverance of what is, I think defined as success, right? Or overcoming obstacle or adversity, right? And also, I think the flip side of that coin is, what are the consequences, right? And so I think it's, who's afforded resilience, is really tied to our identities and the privileges, and that's shaped by sort of the society and the systems that we live in. And so I think in terms of public health professionals, particularly since we're committed to improving lives, and enhancing and the communities that we live in, I think we have a responsibility to first define it for ourselves, right? What does resilience look like to me, or what does resiliency look like to me? And in that context, it's being a Black woman who's Muslim, who's Somali, right? I'm an act of resistance, right? Every day that I show up, that is me being resilient, right? And pursuing things that that show, that favor what feeds me, what addresses my needs. That is, to me, I guess now, how I define what being resilient means, right? So I think everyone, individually, we have to first figure out what that definition is, and then collectively, when we're applying it to the context of community health, be very clear about that definition and the ways that we're promoting resilience, to ensure that we're not creating more harm or exacerbating inequities. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dr. Hang?
Yeah, wonderful response. Thank you. So I thought I would explain a little bit about my background, because it helps maybe just contextualize some of the things I'm going to say. So I've had a wonderful career doing lots of interesting things. Been the president of the Wilder Foundation for 10 years. I'm getting to create a brand new college that's actually being structured with its mission and vision to actually address health inequities. I've worked in county government. I've been a community organizer. I've held hands with homeless families and created sexual assault protocols for hospitals. So I've done a lot of interesting things in the community. And as I think about this question, and especially the time that we've been living through as public health professionals, because that's also a field that I've dedicated my life to, advancing in a lot of different ways. I think about this period of time as a combination of, addressing and needing to, from a public health perspective, through COVID and actually the civic and social unrest that we've been experiencing, as a trauma-ridden time in history for all of us who are in helping professions. So the speed, the uncertainty of COVID, the intensity, and the necessity of decision-making in very rapid cycles in healthcare and in the community and in any helping profession, and also in families, even with, who we're going to socialize with, who we're not going to socialize with. The entire world, along with us as public health professionals, are going through global trauma, right? And it's through relationships and through actually the distribution of goods and services, vaccines in particular, or knowledge, very uneven. So, I agree with Dr. Farah that, depending on where you are situated in society, it's been extremely stressful. And for those of us in the Hmong community, many people have died because they didn't have access to information. They didn't have access to transportation. They didn't have access to socialization via Zoom even, or FaceTime, because they didn't know how to use these tools. So we're all going through this together. how we have stayed together, what I've witnessed with health providers, people at the University of St. Thomas and the College of Health, is that, for those of us who've been in decision-making roles, and many public health professionals are in decision-making roles, it's staying grounded of in who you are, the place that you're at, the role you have, and making the decisions that you can control in a way that you're happy with. In other words, not everybody gets to make decisions, but if you get to be that decision maker, making the choices that make you satisfied as a public health professional is really, really important. I've done that as a dean. I created a school of nursing in a college during a pandemic. I couldn't control a lot of things, and I was new to academia, but I tried. And so, that's really, really important. And actually, the focusing on your assets as an individual and in your organization is very, very important. But I think that, the thing that I think about in this time that we all need to do is, because we have been addressing trauma, overcoming adversity, and actually perhaps personally struggling with things, that our emotional reservoirs are depleted. And, you can actually feel yourself. I don't know, for some of you, you may have noticed your energy being depleted, your social and emotional feelings, reserve, spirituality being depleted. But there's a different tipping point for each person. So I think understanding and identifying what those are for yourself and what you can do to restore those, could be going on a run, could be cooking, could be being with your community, your mom, your dad. That's all really important. And then, when I think about resolve, I think about how we all have resolve, but that we consistently need to be moving in one direction in public health. And if our resolve falters, that's also okay. It's okay to take a break and to forge ahead again later. And so don't do things alone. And surround yourself with nutritious people. Relationships are nutritious, and they're also toxic. But part of that resolve is ensuring, especially from a public health perspective, that we're doing it together. And so taking a break and picking it up again, the courage to continue, sleeping 10 hours, that's also fine. I don't know about you guys, but chocolate usually helps me. So, but having chocolate with friends, that actually tastes better to me. So anyway, I'll stop there because I've said a lot, but I think it's important to recognize that the speed, intensity, ambiguity, and the necessity of rapid decision-making has really worn us out. But we can actually slow ourselves down too. Like, we don't need to keep, just because we had to do that for a super long time, doesn't mean that we have to keep going there. So there's a vigilance, which of course, elevates our cortisol levels, makes us more stressed, like we're really in that time. And I think we're still not completely out of it, starting to as a society.
Thank you, Dr. Hang. Second question, what should early career public health professionals add to their set of skills that academia may not be able to prepare them for?
I think the first thing that I would share is that, everything is public health, right? It's not just a discipline, right? And so I would encourage, folks entering the career, that not to limit their interventions and ideas to one single box, right? Look at all aspects of life and society as levers, right? To kind of pull on, to help advance sort of population health, right? I would also say that academia provides sort of a foundation to some extent, but it's also limited, right? As we become more diverse in our community, become more multicultural, I think it's important to build connections with the communities that we're hoping to serve, right? Building our own cultural intelligence. You know, what does it mean to work alongside diverse groups of people, right? How do I show up in those spaces? You know, and how do I connect, right? Just to borrow the idea of, you know, creating relationships, right? I think we're so involved in a society that promotes transactional relationships, right? And public health really is creating the human experience, right? And so making sure that we're really developing relationships with communities and with each other that are really looking at seeing our who we are, our identity, our lived experiences, valuing our lived experiences, using that to kind of inform and co-create sort of what health looks like and is defined as, right? I would also say, because you're going to be interacting with individuals and different at different levels, right? You also have to protect yourself, right? So carving out personal time, right? To ground yourself sometimes. Sometimes you have to take a step back and find ways to fill up your own cup, right? Because it's you know, stress can be transferable. You can get secondary trauma from just dealing with communities that are often impacted by a stressful event all the time, right? Or yourself, right? And so just trying to create space for you to reflect, trying to find tools that you can use from time to time to help ground you in the work that you do, but also to make sure that that your mind, body, and soul are always attended to.
Thank you. Dr. Hang?
Yeah, so I think about public health as a very diverse field. I mean, it is an academic discipline, but you know, there are many different that work, different types of people who work in public health. And so as a professional, you're coming from many different places, and that's fine. And it's good. So I think that what academia prepares us for is really a good foundation for critical thinking. And what we lack in academia, which is what you get after you graduate, is really how are you going to apply that critical thinking, regardless of what major you were, or you know, whether you were trained as a physician, to actually apply and use that knowledge to advance society in some way. So I think about people who have a college degree as or above as the scholarly class in America, and you know, in other societies, they actually identify that as the scholarly class. And there's some societal expectations related to that. We don't do that as much here in the United States. I mean, I have a father who was actually educated in the country of Laos, because I'm a refugee kid who grew up to be somebody. And they really taught, you know, people who did go to school, even with a high school degree, and moving on to college, that they were part of a scholarly class that had a responsibility for shaping society. And, you know, you hear this language at graduation, but frankly, you don't hear it much after that. And it's because those of us with an education, especially a 4-year degree or above, are part of a privileged class. So I tell people that when you feel super comfortable is when you're actually in a situation of privilege. And so to unlearn that for the populations in public health, you know, that we are trying to keep well for the community, education in a higher ed institution socializes us into the prestige and comfort of being in a class of people who actually have that foundation of critical living thinking, but not for a critical, significant life. And so that has to be remembered every single time. If you are, as I have been, dedicated my entire life to those who are the most disadvantaged in society, you lose that if you're only surrounding yourself with people who are in a privileged class. And so, and obviously, multiple identities matter, how you see yourself. So the critical analysis when you're actually in the profession is, can you take these critical thinking skills you've learned in an academic setting, zoom up and down the social ladder, the economic ladder, the racial ladder, because people pretend we don't have one, but we do. There is a hierarchy in race and racism, and say, what are the assumptions here from a policy perspective, a health perspective, a community perspective that I should really question as part of the scholarly class? And there are many skills that you don't learn in higher education that you should learn when you're in the workplace. So, I would encourage you to think about the skill set, the critical thinking as that's your academic training. What has that done to you or not done for you? So I'm just going to speak generally, that questioning assumptions, what is actually happening here? And those frameworks, theory-based learning, I call, super important. There's the living aspect of it. Now in the community, we talk about that as lived experiences, right? But the truth is that the lived experience becomes ever dimmer the higher up you go in a leadership role. And so your job is to remember that constantly. Professional skills, early career public health professionals, things that might be missing. I'm going to talk from the perspective of someone who has managed a lot of people. Where are we short? Budget and financing skills. This is very tactical. What you need to all learn how to read numbers. Yep, because we learn about data with other sources, but we don't necessarily learn in public health about the power of money. The power of money. Yep, learn it now. Super important. It is a tool for advancing the common good. Cultural competency. We work in a field, we think we're good at it, we're not. We still need to learn because, part of the zooming up and understanding, hey, wait a second here, maybe I went to college and it was a white system, like what happened? Yeah, we don't learn the content that we should necessarily about ourselves or about the information. And it kind of depends on which institution you went to. And, I was a psychology major, the different people, different perspective. Other third very practical thing, and you can do it now, you can do it every day, you could join Toastmasters, is how you are judged is how you speak and how you write. And more often than not in a visual kind of like setting like this, it's really speaking. In academia, we're really great with the writing and the generation of knowledge, but in the community, it's really public speaking. And then finally, and most importantly, because public health is really about collective work, thinking about population health, it's really understanding participation, engagement, and teaming skills. What are the limits of my knowledge in terms of engagement? What am I professing to know, but I really don't know anything about? Or I like to call this the person who starts in a role who is sure that they know everything, but not well informed yet enough to actually make a real opinion. And unfortunately, and I hate to tell you all this, but leadership and providing leadership in any field is the process of being revealed to the world. In other words, if you really don't know something, it's going to show because people know when you're faking it. And, that's why we also feel like we maybe in our early career have imposter syndrome. But, the only way to head that off is to say, I really don't know how to do that part. And I think you're actually better at this. So, how do we leverage our skills? And that's really, that takes a lot of, I would say, emotional regulation, learning and insight about ourselves and what we bring to the table and what we really don't. I mean, I tell my team all the time, please help me. I'm not very detail oriented. I will misspell words. I'll be off on my numbers. I just know I'm not good at that. And that's okay, because I have a budget and finance person who's good at that, but I understand the major concepts. Then that also requires some confidence, right? To actually disclose to the people you're working with that you're not really good at that part.
Thank you. I have two more questions, but I want very much for the audience to be able to interact with you. So I'm going to combine them. You have stated some of the answers. The first one is, how did you navigate challenges in your professional career that brought you to this stage of success, respect, and unparalleled contribution to the field? And I also would like to know if you carry with you a sage advice or wisdom that you learned early on that still serves you well. Combination of two questions. And we have about 5 minutes. So.
Yeah, I think there are, for me at least, I understanding my why, right? Understanding my purpose and consistently reminding myself of why I'm doing the work, why I'm engaged in this work is what sort of continues to help me kind of navigate difficult situations, right? Also, affirmations, to be quite honest, right? Telling myself that I belong in the spaces that I'm in, that I'm worthy of being in those spaces, that my voice matters, that I carry with me not only my story but my family's story, and those have the ability to change how we provide care, right? Or how we engage with communities, and being confident, right? That that there's value, right, in me being in those spaces. And I think when there are moments where I may feel less than it's been difficult to navigate. I mean, like, difficult times, right? Leaning on prayer, right? Leaning on self-care rituals, right? Like reflection, taking time to reflect, or taking time to really rest, right? Rest is important. Or journaling, or really leaning on support systems, and they come in the forms of family or friends or community elders, however you define what that support system looks like. So I think those are the ways in which I have navigated a lot of the challenges I've experienced in my life, is remembering my why, remembering who I am, where I come from, and why I'm doing the work. Remembering that I don't have to shoulder it alone, and that I can lean and borrow strength and wisdom from my community or people that are in my support system, and remembering that I'm human and I deserve rest when I need it.
Thank you. Dr. Hang?
Yeah, so this is Antonia might not remember this, but she actually knew me before I became president of the Wilder Foundation, and she kind of saw that happen. I think we got to know each other when I was at Ramsey County. Anyway, I saw her after I became president. It was in the middle of my comprehensive exam year at Hamline University.
Yes.
Actually, when I became president of the Wilder Foundation, I saw Antonia at a meeting because she was at the Wilder Center for something. And she goes, "Congratulations, MayKao. I'm so happy for you, and I'm praying for you." And the reason why she was praying for me is because my job as the president of the Wilder Foundation, an organization that I led for a decade, my job, my first few years, was to downsize the organization by 30% and to reposition it and create energy and excitement for Wilder's future. We were in the middle of the recession, and I was 37 years old. Okay, the job I have right now is, MayKao Hang, never been a dean before. Why don't you create a college of health, merge existing units, and launch a school of nursing in the middle of a pandemic? Okay. So, I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, by the way, and I wasn't really looking to leave Wilder, but I was recruited. All of this is to say, yes, I've been in a few difficult situations, and I'm sure you all have too, on a different scale. So here's how I have survived, and I'm not sure if this is way sage advice or not, is the first is, when you choose jobs and things that you're working on that you love, even when things get very difficult, passion will carry you through. It will carry you through, and you will be able to do it. And don't do it alone, as Dr. Farah said. I had a very wise person when I first started taking leadership roles. I've been running multi-million-dollar shops since the age of 27, by the way. So I got this job. One of the commissioners at Ramsey County, Susan Haig, wonderful person, said to me, MayKao, never leave a job in less than 3 years. First year you're learning, second year you're doing, third year you're contributing. And I have stuck to that advice because let me tell you, there've been a few jobs I've taken where I thought, I'm just going to go back to the old role that I had. This is really too hard to do. So, stay for a while and contribute what you can so that you can demonstrate that you've added value. When the other thing that I've really lived by is that giving a generous spirit, whether giving in the workplace or giving in the community, should never have a return requirement. In other words, a lot of people think about relationships as transactional. If I'm doing this for you, then you need to do that for me later. Not the way to go. Every bridge and every program or every person I've supervised or whatever, that when I've given mentoring advice or people have sought me out, or even this session, I am just authentically who I am. And I give with no expectations, whether they be anything concrete, like a real gift, a lunch, anything, no return. I truly love what I do, and people feel that. And I think that when you give of yourself with no expectation of return in the workplace and elsewhere, you will be successful. Obviously, it requires skill and all of that. But when you're more freely giving, people also give back to you. They give advice. They give you prayer, like Antonia gave to me. And it does all work. So why don't I just end there?
Oh, you have good memory. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hang. I would like to open up for you to have a conversation with Drs. Hang and Dr. Farah. And the first question in the chat box, wow, there are more than, let's see, Ellen, you had the one. The field of public health has changed in many years. What is the more important transformation, that still needs to come? No exact order.
I think, living in the digital age and relying heavily on data, I think sometimes we use that as a crux, right? Sometimes we kind of already know anecdotally what's taking place in communities, and we don't necessarily need data to support what we're seeing or hearing from the communities that we're serving, right? And so while I think that data is important, I think also human experience and engaging communities is also equally powerful, right? How do we continue to keep a pulse on the needs of who we're in service to, right? Because I think that's the best way to really be able to ensure that all of us have an opportunity to realize our full potential, right? I think often where data delays our ability to act, right? or it masks our insecurities about realities that exist, right? That we don't want to necessarily face, right? And so I would say that how do we continue to ensure that we're centering the voices and the needs of the individuals that we're serving or in service to, and making sure that it's culturally responsive, that it's that they can see themselves fostering belongingness, right? I think that is the way in which we can transform how we practice public health, how we deliver care, or how we deliver services. The more people can see themselves in the process, the more people can see themselves thriving, the more people can see themselves engaged in key decision-making processes. I think will really advance us into an age of us being able to thrive.
Thank you. Dr. Hang?
Yeah, so I would say, at least in the 25 or 26 years I've been in the field, or been looking at work that's actually happening, that the field has really matured as a profession, and that it's there's growing recognition about the importance of public health and strategies in public health, around population health. The thing that I think may be different or new, and or I think we're moving into, is this piece that Dr. Farah also talked about, which is we can look at data and we can look at trends and we can actually measure all these things, but what we're lacking is sophistication in the interpretation of such data in terms of its relevance to the communities impacted. And so numbers are really good, metrics are good, but I think we saw this throughout the pandemic, that it's not good enough. and because the people who are sitting around making decisions don't have also the right information about, from a social, cultural, economic perspective, how to interpret that data, or how to make it, how to move systems. That's really our frontier in terms of thinking through how do we do that faster and better. And I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I know that there will be a lot of insight and learning about this, in the years to come. And I think we'll learn, actually, from a research perspective, a lot about public health and what's truly required on the human front. Yeah, and I think about how one of my former volunteer activities is working with Jan Malcolm and Dr. Michael Oakes on the Interdisciplinary Research Leaders Program with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So health equity projects from across the country. And Michael is a social epidemiologist. But I feel like that field of study and kind of understanding how all that comes together, that there's a lot more to look at into the future. But it really is about this. Data is really good and population health is really good. We know it needs to shift. But I think the micro shifts at a community relevance level, impacting, like the differential impact on communities, and also the relevance in terms of interpreting that data, really needs to come to the forefront. And I'm sure you see it too, with all the work that you've been engaged in.
Thank you. I have two comments in the chat box, and Kathleen Schuler, I'm not sure if you had a question there, and Evet Ellis, if you would like to make a comment or you'd like me to read what you have.
This is Kathleen. I just wanted to say that it's very important for white people to educate themselves on anti-racism and to continue. And it's not a one-time thing like reading one book. We need to keep working on it so that we can listen to and honor people of color and their experience and cultural, the cultural milieu that people live in. So thank you.
Thank you. Evet, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Ellis.
Yeah, it's Yvette. I was just kind of commenting and hoping to kind of get a perspective on the fact that oftentimes we find ourselves in positions of leadership, being in a BIPOC community, and some of the challenges that we continue to face in those helping professions are that of identifying those realities, especially working with those marginalized individuals and that BIPOC community. But for individuals that are not in that community, they don't seem to, or oftentimes struggle with understanding those realities that are faced. And sometimes it's just in care and how things are being approached, like when seeking out care. So it's like I'm trying to find ways to help support that space, to, I don't know, like just trying to find resources to make the community feel more comfortable in getting services without feeling like judged or feel like, you know, they're in a bad situation and they're not able to advocate appropriately for like the healthcare that they need or the support that they need in those spaces. And it's just because I'm in like northwestern Minnesota, and so in this space, it's not very colorful, but yet we're surrounded by a large indigenous communities that they do provide services to, but it's just such a big separation between in town and the tribal community. And so it's just that care, I'm just seeing a big lack or engagement in those spaces. So yeah, just if someone wanted to kind of speak to that, that just, it just really stands out for me in this space.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of so some of the strategies that have worked in the past and in my direct work actually in the community with situations like that is that early engagement and exposure and socialization really helps. So, you know, one of the situations I worked with was really bringing up chemical dependency services at Wilder. And, you know, a lot of people in immigrant and refugee communities, they don't understand what that is. They don't understand what's happening with them. And of course, they cared about their family members who were actually in those situations with needing addiction support and services. And so we just did tours, like opened our doors and kind of created familiarity for people, so that, you know, the first time engagement wasn't like, and now you need services or now you're going for certain things, but creating that welcoming environment is really, really important. And that's something that can be done early on. You know, one of the things that I think a lot about with cultural informants and navigators is you don't want those relationships to be built when that community or that person's already in distress, and creating those openings in familiar places really helps. You know, another example is I remember in this community a time worked on a case where a Hmong woman killed her 6 children and tried to kill herself. Some of you who live in this community might remember that. You know, she didn't, help was always in reach, but never connected for her. And so I think about, you know, in public health, you know, you're talking about primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention, but that secondary piece with making sure that those who are in these communities know about that community and are feeling comfortable with populations that are different. I mean, that's another way to go about it. There was a time when, you know, like there were no mental health services for Southeast Asian refugees that I worked on. And, you know, we had to bring up services that were really about social engagement initially to educate different populations. And, you know, Southeast Asian communities are large, right? It's not just one language. It's like people talk about the Somali community as if it's monolithic. it's not. And so, bringing out these strategies early and often so that you also are not all alone trying to do that work. I mean, this does actually take a long time to build, and that it does get better, but I totally get the frustration, and also just completely understand, at the point of delivery and intersection of help, when that help is not appropriate, too far, or it disengages the person. Yeah, I always have felt like what we can do as public health professionals is to really be angry on their behalf and to use what we know to actually shift that service for the next time, or to create that opportunity when it presents itself. So I think about opportunities for actual engagement and change as, when conflict arises, I use every opportunity to swoop in there and to actually assert my view about how things could be better. And so don't waste a good crisis. Or, if someone doesn't get the service they need, I just go again next time. And I have been very diligent about doing that, regardless of what encounter it might be. Lots of different ways to think about it.
Thank you, Dr. Hang. Mary Kramer, would you like to make a comment? You wrote something in the chat box.
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank all these speakers today. This is such a profound discussion. And it reminded me of a quote that I remember from 25 years ago in my grad training.
People closer to the pain need to be closer to the power.
Yeah.
Oh,
If I can
yes.
just add before we close, to both Kathleen and Evitt, I think, individuals that are from the dominant community, besides education, I think there's an opportunity to use their positions of power and privilege, right, to move this work along, right, in advocating, in and also providing allyship, right. In addition, I think we have to remind ourselves that stories are powerful, right? They have the ability to change hearts, to drive conversations, and so I think lean into that a little bit. Make sure that I think it's important to continue to share stories, right? And share our lived experiences and the way that those lived experiences impact, right? How our care, our health, right? And hold that tension, right? It's also important to remind ourselves and others that our human condition and our humanity is tied to one another. They're interconnected and interdependent, right? And so is our success, right? And I think the more we have honest conversations and exchanges, and the better opportunities we have in building bridges, right? That allow us to really then address the issues that we have and the conditions in our environment, right? And so just wanted to add that.
You're muted, Antonia.
Thank you, and sorry about that. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'd like to know if Dr. Hang and Dr. Farah would have any parting words, any words of wisdom. We are so grateful for your presence and your words and messages.
I think I just want to say thank you to, MPHA for having me today. And also I want to say to thank all of you that have joined us in this conversation today. I know that, the last 2 years have been difficult to say the least. And I want to just extend my heartfelt gratitude for trying to keep our communities safe. And so I thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just really grateful to have an opportunity to talk with all of you. And also, I know that it's been a rough couple of years, and it was before, and it will be after as well. But that I'm really confident that all of you will continue to do a great job. And thanks so much for inviting me. I always feel like it's such an honor to be talking to people who are actually doing the hard work every single day. And now that I'm in academia, I even feel guiltier, not being in the trenches. But it's wonderful, and I hope you keep going, and I wish you all the best. Thank you all.
Thank you so very much for taking the time. Ellen, Mary, any final words that you'd like to add to this discussion?
Just thank you so much for coming. I will share our last couple slides.
Thank you so much. So good to hear from both of you.
We have come to the end of our time together, folks. And as I've been kind of just reflecting on this whole experience, going back to, I think like even September, I think when I talked to Antonia about if she would be willing to co-chair with me. And I think one of my favorite words is attunement, which I learned about from Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. And a theme that has really been impressed upon me throughout this whole process is just, I think, both the need that I think we all have for being attuned to each other, being resonating in each other's shared experiences, and using that to support ourselves and the relationships that we're having. And I guess it's no surprise because together is in the title of this conference, but I just have really appreciated all of the points of, I think, like shared resonance and attunement that I personally have felt, whether it was breathing together yesterday with the Irreducible Grace Foundation, hearing Dr. Cunningham talk about the need for alignment at a state level to address health equity. This morning thinking about my own, I don't know, in tuneness, if that's a word or not, with like the planet and environmental health, all these breakout sessions where people are sharing about, their works, challenges and questions and joys and opportunities. And those are all things that we share. And then ending on this conversation with Dr. Hang and Dr. Farah, really talking about that need to be attuned to our community, accept ourselves and what we're going through, and the needs that we have in order to be resilient and carry on. So thank you so much. I also want to thank the members of our planning committee, because really this whole vision for this conference and the speakers and everything is because of each individual person and their contributions. So I have to thank Antonia. Thank you so much for co-chairing with me. And Mary Grand, MPHA's executive director, and the other folks that have helped us, Emily Akers, Laura Bowen, Helga Notura, Chloe Wallace, Hannah Kinzer, William Toscano, Keisha Haslett, Delaney Anderson, Tegan Walsh, Shroz Trania, and Morgan Mulhern. Thank you so much for all of your help. Before I get to the housekeeping stuff, Antonia, do you have something you want to say in closing?
I too have great words of thanks and gratitude, and really feeling extremely fortunate and blessed to have colleagues such as Dr. Farah and Dr. Hang come to help us close this important conference. Your words, your advice, and sharing with us your own lived experience that serves as inspiration for all of us. The 2.5 days have been incredibly critical for us in these times that we face, because they were hopeful, They were engaging, they were supportive. And thank you both, Dr. Hang and Dr. Farah. Dr. Hang, we appreciate your encouraging words because God knows that's what we need in these times, that the difficulties that we face are difficulties that we are not going to see an end to it. We hope that we are going to help lighten the load, both for our communities, for the issues, and the support that we need from everyone, not only at the local level, but also at the national level. Thank you so very much for the attendance to this conference. I am so appreciative to have been a co-chair. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Mary.
So I know there is a reaction button, but I want it to really be from me specifically. Anyways, the sessions that have been recorded will be posted to MPHA's YouTube channel, and a link to that will be shared in the post-conference information. The evaluation forms and the credit request forms will also be emailed afterwards. Please share any and all feedback. MPHA is member driven, and so we really, base what we're doing based on what we hear from folks. If you have any questions, you can contact Mary at the email address on the screen, which you also can find on our website. The poster hall and exhibit hall are still open on our website as well. If you're like, this is the best thing ever, it's Friday, I want to get super involved with MPHA, here are some next things in the upcoming future that we want to invite you to engage with us on. The second part of our series, Stable and Safe, Addressing the Health Needs of Urban Unhoused People, will be May 16th. And then we also have a presentation on tribal tobacco use on May 18th. Both of those are virtual. And then we also want to invite everyone to our annual business meeting and awards ceremony. If you're not a member of MPHA, we welcome you with immense enthusiasm and excitement. If anyone has any financial barriers that would prevent them from joining, please know that we have funds available. And then we always want to put in a plug for our committees. Conference committee will be restarting again this fall if you want to be involved in that. But really, we have a wide range of conferences and ways for people to engage in leadership and professional development ways as well. Mary, would you like to say anything?
I echo the appreciation and gratitude for the planning committee, the co-chairs, Antonia and Ellen, are fantastic presenters. I will say that when we opened our RFP for the conference for this year, we had the highest number of submissions that we've ever had. And it's so wonderful to have such an engaged and interested public health community and audience. So thank you all. I hope you have a restful weekend, and please watch for follow-up emails from us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I think you guys did an outstanding job today. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you too for your participation. I so appreciate being in the planning committee. What a wonderful group of people. Everybody makes such important contributions.
And you and Ellen.
Thanks, Mary, for your leadership. Thank you, Ellen, for that wonderful partnership and support. I so appreciate. I had a great time. I had fun. It was work. We had to go after people that we wanted because we knew they had a place in this conference, but